Hello, everyone. Mike Mosquito with the Buzz Podcast, here with a special episode for you today. And I've got three amazing guests that are going to be joining us to talk about cybersecurity. Again, these episodes are for you to understand that we are bringing content to the industry and supported by those that are actually doing this good work. I've got Jordan, I've got Craig, and I've got Stephanie joining me today. This content is centered around the executive protections and the next era of digital trust. So we're going to jump right into it with an introduction of Jordan.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, my name is Jordan Lamoreaux. I'm the Director of Threat Monitoring and Response at Banner Health. In addition to that, I'm a Chief Warrant Officer under the Cyber Branch of the U.S. Army, part of the Western Cyber Protection Command in the Army Reserves.
Stephanie?
Hey, thanks, Mike. Hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie Aceves. I am the Global Head of Sales Engineering at an organization named Doppel, like doppelgangers. We partner with organizations like Banner to help with brand and executive protection, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with everyone today.
Craig?
Craig George with GuidePoint Security, local here in Arizona, supporting healthcare systems like Banner. My background comes from a time, almost a decade and a half as an operator, as a former CISO, gone now to the consulting side, spent most of my career in the healthcare. I'm incredibly excited that I've had the opportunity to partner with this Arizona HIMSS chapter here to provide these up and coming. We're going to be doing these monthly podcast series on cyber education. So thank you, Mike, for hosting us.
They're very much glad to do so, Craig. And we definitely would like to thank the Arizona HIMSS chapter and particularly the president of Arizona HIMSS, Tanya Fanyan, for partnering with us to bring this content to not only her chapter, but to the ecosystem of healthcare as a whole. We learn from those that are already doing this good work. And today's conversation is not just about phishing and emails, but other cyber checklists that you need to be able to go through and what Jordan's seeing at his institution. And then it's about trust. And how do we get to trust? In healthcare, how do we move around this trust mechanism for cyber? And itself, how do we become more intuitively educated about what's exploited and what's attacked, and how do we remediate? So we're going to get into this conversation, whether it's clinical or operational. Jordan's going to take us through what he's doing in his shop, and we're going to talk about how clinicians quickly adjust and how patients feel about this adjustment in healthcare, and how teams have to coordinate around this healthcare mechanism of cybersecurity. So again, hope you're along for this ride. Let's hop right into it. So Jordan, this has been a great episode thus far because I've gotten to learn a little bit about you. You're former military too, right? Learn a little bit about our guests here. Tell us a little bit about our background and where you come from. You come from a pretty rigid environment that has rules and regulations. You decided to take a full-time job over there, huh?
Yes. Before healthcare, I was actually in the financial sector. So my civilian career within cybersecurity, I have always been under the thumb or the boot of a regulatory body. Prior to Banner, it was the FRB and the OCC, and now I'm in the umbrella of HIPAA.
I love it. So tell us a little bit about your shop and what's happening with cybersecurity. You brought this context of cybersecurity from a military standpoint into a healthcare setting, and it has rules and regulations you have to follow. Tell me about Banner's posture for cyber and protections and building this trust.
So if you think about trust, I believe it's quintessential with the relationship of availability. So in the financial sector, we gain trust by our clients being able to have access to their resources, their bank accounts, brokerage accounts, or whatever, and that's always available. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, you would see heavy investments in DDoS protections and always focusing on the perimeter. Well, within healthcare, we gain patient trust by having availability with their doctor, whether that's their nurse, the orthopedic surgeon, or their primary care physician, and the availability of that doctor is at risk, essentially, based on the threats that we're seeing now with AI usage in social engineering attacks. And if you can even just successfully harvest a credential or social engineer your way into gaining access into a provider's account, essentially the remediation that is they have to get blocked and they have to go through a whole process. So you can take out a provider, thus their availability for not only just one patient, but whoever was lined up for that entire day. And so then the organization loses that trust with
Mhm.
those patients. And not only that, but they lose that potential business. Some of these small, again, from the financial sector, we had small branch offices, not too worried about them losing money because they're part of the bigger company. And again, banking is heavily regulated and there's a lot of controls around it. But if a doctor is not available in a small surgery center or a small urgent care, which may service a small rural area, like that can take that surgery center out of business and have a huge impact to the local community. So availability is extremely extremely important.
I love the way you took that context around the patient as well. And this is going to be timely. So yesterday I go to my mailbox, and Craig, I'm coming to you next because this is going to be relevant for you. I go to my mailbox and I receive a letter. This letter is from my healthcare provider that says they had a breach in October 2024 and I'm being notified of it. I'm saying, didn't we cross into 2026? Why am I just now getting a letter that they received? They know that it was breached, and they were able to get my name, address, and social security number in 2024, and I am just getting notified. Craig, you help organizations that have these types of problems on the back end because this is the third party reaching out to me. What do you have to say about what Jordan's doing in his shop right now, and how do you help remediate things like this letter I received?
Yeah, Jordan touched on a good point around credential compromise as being the easy spot that organizations continue to struggle. One of the areas and why we invited Doppel here was getting more into the trust sector of executive brand protection and what AI impersonation is doing from those attacks. So obviously phishing is a battle we've all kind of lost in the cyber realm here for a while. Externally, it's something that we keep losing to. Internally, it's sometimes considered nuance to the teams because we continue just spending time investigating those. Jordan, from your standpoint, like how is impersonation attacks with AI voice and video having a real operational impact to patient safety, and more specific to like that doctor use case you were mentioning?
Well, the induction of AI basically brings deepfakes into the threat landscape. Before there was a lot of easy tells. Again, speaking just of phishing, there was a lot of easy tells when it came to this is obviously phishing, at least for some of us in the bubble. Grammar errors, bad punctuation, having not being able to mask or spoof, the sending address, and they're just not having that good context in an email, which allowed, for the most part, most people to be able to identify the difference between a phishing campaign versus just a regular email. But with AI, they can now actually, there is great grammar, there's great pronunciation, there's context behind it. They exploit a sense of urgency, especially in healthcare. And you can have a back and forth conversation. We've actually seen that to where, the victim is, investigating what this invoice is and why it's so important. And then you'll see the AI chatbot behind the scenes actually having a full-on conversation with them. And this even dabbles into deepfakes of voice calls, text messages, or even video calls, which, is why we've started to work with Doppel here.
Yeah, and Jordan, I love that you're sharing these real world, situations you all are running into. There's a report that CrowdStrike releases every year, and coincidentally, Mike, in 2024, they reported that between the first half of 2024 to the second half, vishing social engineering was up 442%.
Wow.
And it was all conducted by AI. And so this is exactly where Doppel has entered the arena to help us navigate what trust means or what trust means in this world. Jordan, what you're talking about is something that we deal with every day. And how do we encourage employees or customers to enable themselves to educate themselves on what a deep fake looks like or how it moves? And so I won't get super into the weeds, but we created a vishing simulation product at Doppel that is paired with enablement to get ahead of human risk management, just because, to your point, Jordan, it is so hard to tell these days when everything is perfectly crafted to be able to deceive the end user or the end recipient.
I love that, I'm part of this 400% uptick here. Stephanie, thank you for that information. Uh, but it happens in so many nooks and crannies of the healthcare system and financial systems, right? There's always someone trying to get in and get this data for misuse, because there's not a good reason to hack, right? And so let's talk about other blind spots around that. We've got AI, Jordan, as you talked about. Let's talk about our help desk, social engineering, and resetting credentials, MFA, PAM, policies. And we've got AI now in the mix with this. Now we got AI that could be managing these policies, but we've got agentic AI that can manage the AI that's managing the policies. And it's got guardrails, right? So I asked this question in New York 2 weeks ago. You put agentic AI in, you give it access privileges, and it changes the privileges for the AI downstream that's watching. Who's watching the watcher? So Jordan, talk to me about the bypasses of PAM and MFA, and why is this so hard to stop, especially for an institution like Banner, and you bringing your partners around you, like GuidePoint and Doppel, to help you with these problems? Talk to me about that.
Well, I think, again, the bad actors are always going to try to pursue the path of least resistance. Mm-hmm. So much like AI is a force multiplier for a SOC analyst, mm-hmm. by being able to contextualize enough data to determine severity of an alert, but also impact and exposure. For the bad actors, AI is a force multiplier for them, and they don't need to actually bypass MFA and try to conduct a more complex threat vector when they can use AI, call the help desk, and do this on a large scale in rapid succession. Mm-hmm. And again, if you're the defender, you have to be right 100% of the time. If you're an attacker, you just need at least one to get through, and then you've made your pay. And then they move on to the next target. And sometimes it's not even, again, like the movies make hacking and cyber threats sometimes more complicated than it really needs to be. Sometimes it's as simple as I'm going to use AI to help me simulate someone's voice. Once I've gotten those credentials, I'm going to log into the system. I'm not going to try to exfiltrate because there's a lot of controls around that. I'm just simply going to go into Workday. I'm going to change the direct deposit account, for this doctor. And this is 1 day before paychecks are clearing. And then I'm going to move on to the next target, and I got my payday. It doesn't need to be as sophisticated as you would think. Mm-hmm. When again, like the low-hanging fruit still works, and now AI is just a force multiplier to have them be more proficient at their job and do so in a larger scale.
Yeah, Jordan, I love that you're talking about that. I started my career red teaming and on the endpoint incident response side of the house. And what we saw trending right in the industry for a long time was it started to get a little bit more difficult to phish people via email when you start thinking about these organized crime units that are trying to do it at scale. And so they started to reprioritize vulnerabilities, initial access, anything that they could do to kind of, to your point, find the path of least resistance. But in recent years, because security, we'll say, regiment has gotten more sophisticated, and we're actually finding these 0 days before they're being identified by attackers, or people are patching. They have different tools to stay ahead of these vulns. Social engineering and the human element of the component has reestablished itself as the leading access vector. And so you think about organized crime, where a lot of times they don't want your data. They might just be trying to get initial act, or they might be trying to get creds so they can broker that on the dark web because they just want to get paid. It becomes so cheap for them, so inexpensive for them to do this at scale, leveraging AI. And this is what organizations, healthcare and otherwise, are up against. And this is how we, as the defenders of the world, have to think about, if it's super cheap to just make my organization a victim, how do I make it more expensive? Right. How can I make it harder so they don't want to target? And this is where, again, not to be overtly salesy, but this is the problem that we solve at Doppel, which is why I love it. We make it really expensive because we take down all the infrastructure if an attacker is trying to create social engineering campaigns against an organization like Banner.
It's a war of attrition. And again, even 20 years in the military, if the enemy can spend $100 lobbing a rocket over the fence, but my counter to that is $1 million missile, I will lose this fight. So again, like when if they can cheaply do something, they can do it at scale. You're now in a war of attrition, and then as the defenders, you have to meet that moment.
Yep.
And again, and we can go into that detail of like, in my opinion, how I've brought some of my military experience into the cyber defense sector on the civilian side, is to meet the moment that we're seeing.
Do you think most organizations are meeting the moment, Jordan? Let's just have that candid conversation. Or do you think it's not going to be me?
Well, I think I would say no. Most of them aren't. All right, and because you have to prioritize, in my opinion, threat intelligence.
Mhm.
That has to be the first and foremost, because you want to, it's a trope, but you want to fight them over there before they come. Before you don't want to fight them over here, and so you want to have a very robust threat intelligence team that is providing you with proactive information that you can preemptively build your defensive posture around. And in addition to that, with that threat intelligence, that feeds a threat model to where now you can actually do threat hunting. Because again, you want to know who are the bad guys, how do they plan on attacking us, will they be effective, but and can we detect it, can we respond to it? That's typical. But what most places fail is the last question: did they already attack us, and have we just not noticed it?
Right.
And that's where threat hunting, you start with that hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's a higher level of complexity that most organizations, because it is a new way of doing defense, aren't quite up to speed with. And again, and that's really putting a strong threat intelligence first approach to your overall defensive posture.
I love that. Craig, you're part of the team. So GuidePoint Security, are you guarding that perimeter and external attack along with Doppel? What are you putting together to help ensure this posturing that Jordan's talking about?
It's a programmatic type conversation because there's so many layers. Phishing obviously being a good one. Looking at Doppel from executive brand protection, getting the right threat intelligence in for the executive levels. Those tend to be the high value targets that usually phish and dupe the people. Right, is getting the banner C-suite on an AI phishing type video call. And duping that doctor. So there's attacking that. There's getting things down to like identity assurance and identity proofing around the help desk. Like, how do we ensure the user calling in is the user they say they are for the password reset is a big one. There's even things that part of the Doppel platform that is a layered approach, and things of like, how do we provide more executive training to them as a training? How do we tabletop test and exercise test the executives themselves? How do we tabletop test the service desk around password reset process? Who out there is actually doing that? Who actually runs a tabletop exercise against their service desk password reset process? Mm-hmm. Not many are. So those are all things that we're looking at doing with partnership with Banner at looking at this from more of a programmatic type approach. So
I think you guys have a great recipe. I think, Jordan, the way you lay this out, again, there are steps that most people would know, but there are processes not very many people know they should be doing before they get to the known processes. Because again, most would not know that someone's already been in their organization for a period of time unless they were or had a process of looking for that threat actor before a known event, right? So proactively looking for that threat actor to be in there.
It's like that letter you got. I mean, it's very, very old, and they probably, whoever whatever APT was had successfully compromised the perimeter, they were probably in for 6 to 7, 8 months before they were ever actually detected, which is kind of a common dwell time, depending on which APT group. And then once an investigation happens, so like the fact that you're now just getting that letter is actually somewhat not surprising.
I mean, a year and 3 months after they found the event, I received a letter, right?
But that speaks to, again, meeting the moment of and having partners like GuidePoint who can facilitate a partnership with Doppel is so important, because again, the tip of the spear is only as strong as the weight behind it. And that's where like logistics and supply chain really come in handy. And again, going back to, my military experience is that, if you want to win the war, you need to first focus on the 3B logistics of winning a war, and that's bullets, beans, and band-aids. For every one infantry man that you have in the field, you need at least a team of 1,000 people that is supplying that front line. And again, in your cyber security organization, how fast, let's just say a new need is met, especially with going back to executive protection. We have online harassment is now picking up. Obviously, with the United Healthcare incident last year, this is a real critical aspect where a lot of board members and executives and CEOs like, hey, how are you as the organization going to keep me safe? But if there is a break in your supply chain and it takes you 9 months to onboard a new vendor or a new technology, then you failed to meet the moment and you're already behind the curve and you may have already been attacked and not realized it. And with executive protection, like that is now expanding the attack surface to where it's like I used to could just focus on making sure nobody got in my house, but now it's like I now need to know and have a reach within my entire neighborhood, and I need to have companies and vendors and contractors in those areas of focus, and actually be able to empower them to help me.
Right.
So supply chain and logistics are now like part of the threat model in cybersecurity.
And
Yeah,
you got
and I think on the Doppel side, we heavily rely on partners like GuidePoint. Like, shout out to GuidePoint. They got Partner of the Year for Doppel, but it's because they really understand somebody like Banner's business, and so they know when to bring us on, who to that we need to be speaking to, so that we can actually help solve this problem. So again, as an entire industry, we can help keep the world a little bit safer and keep patients, getting access to care.
And Stephanie, it sounds like you got a very your Batman tool belt is full of tricks and tips to help
Definitely.
partners like Banner here, and to bring in the guide points to give you that rigor and structure to say, hey, we're going to go to these facilities, and here's the work we can do there. And that's where Jordan needs that help. The industry needs partners like you guys that are looking over their shoulder. They're invested in the mission of protection of patient data, the systems, the infrastructure, to ensure that we've done what we need to do to protect against these threat actors. So, Jordan, talk to me as we're getting to the end of our episode here. What's next for Banner? We're into 2026. Looking around the curve for 2026, what's next for you at Banner and your team over there?
Well, so one is focusing on threat intelligence and building out that threat hunting capability, which we did last year, and so expanding that, and maturing it. But going back to the human risk element that Doppel can focus on is actually changing a little bit of our culture. In the military, it's halt who goes there. A private is fully empowered and backed to tell a one-star general, you are not getting in this building because you do not have the right credentials. And if you keep trying, you might take a round in the leg, right? Like, and in the military, that is very normal and accepted. If you are in the wrong place and your badge isn't showing, you're going to get somewhat harassed to prove and re-authenticate. It's a very zero trust in a zero trust culture, but it's not taboo. And so what we've taken is our what was cyber awareness, and now we're actually rebranding them to be cyber operations readiness, to where we're not just focused on testing with phishing campaigns our employee base. We're going to do that, but we're going to expand that with vendors like Doppel into testing our help desk using those AI deepfakes. And expanding how that education and that testing works to really change that culture and that mindset. But in addition to that, readiness is not just with our clients or our employees, but it's also our team. And so you can focus on training. And a lot of people always focus on like the SOC analyst, make sure they have the next cert and they're up to speed on the next tool. But what about our engineers? Have they been trained? Are they ready to meet the moment of the next fight? And so really empowering them to be more of a readiness, which we have in the military. You always have, like it's talked about, that supply chain at your back. Well, we now have a fully functioning, almost like like a typical PMO office, like a project management office. But again, they are cyber focused and on the readiness to make sure that everyone in the front lines and that entire supply chain is ready to meet the moment, in addition to training our employee base. So I think that's the next level of maturity is going to be really, really rebranding and refocus. A lot of traditional shops that have been basically just in, doing the same thing over and over again. Like, all right, every quarter we do a phishing campaign. Here's the results. Okay, that's great, but we need to grow because that's what our threat actors are doing.
Mm-hmm.
The bad guys, they're using the latest technology, and they're always getting better. And we cannot become complacent. We have to keep up with the pace of our adversaries.
Well said, well spoken. Jordan, what's on GuidePoint's roadmap for the rest of 2026? Sorry, Craig, calling you.
It's all good.
Craig, talk to me. What's on GuidePoint's roadmap for 2026?
Yeah, I think given the audience, just excited to have this partnership with HIMSS. You'll see Jordan and I doing these more monthly basis, and we're going to be bringing more real world problems that everyone's facing, especially in the healthcare system space, and it'll be good conversation. So I just look forward to continuing to join you, Mike, on the Buzz Studio. Appreciate you having us.
Definitely glad to be here. Last but not least, the global head of engineering sales for Doppel, Stephanie. Where are you off to next? What's up with your group?
We got lots of stuff coming up. So we're going to have a presence. We've got RSA coming up. I'll be at the Gartner Risk and Security Summit. But ultimately, all that we're driven by is continuing to be the platform for social engineering defense. So I cannot share what's coming, but I can tell you we have more capabilities coming really soon to help talk about this problem and solve this problem of trust in the age of generative AI.
I'm pretty sure this podcast will end up on the dark web, so you don't want to give away tips and tricks. Well, thank you very much. Thank you all very much for joining us today in the studio. You've been insightful. You've been very candid, and we thank you for sharing that with our listeners. Again, for everyone here online with us today, I'm Mike Mosquito with the Buzz Podcast. This is a special episode. Thanks to Arizona HIMSS for co-sponsoring this with GuidePoint and with Doppel to make sure we're bringing this content to you. Make sure you like and subscribe to thebuzzpodcast.net. Find us on your streaming channels where you listen to your podcast. And if we don't see you at a conference soon, we hope to see you online. And make sure you always keep buzzing.